Hey there everyone, I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and today I am happy to put together episode number 45 of the weekly Ratchet. Today we're going to put the scores to the doors and talk about board game scores. Whether you like them high or you like them low, scoring is how you win the game. Or is it? Well, let's chat about it here on the weekly Ratchet. Hey there everyone, and welcome back to the Weekly Ratchet. As always, I hope you've had a fantastic week of getting to play some games with family and or friends. It is Monday, the 20th of January, Martin Luther King Day here in the U.S. It is also about 9:15 in the evening. I actually got to play a bunch of games over the weekend. That's why I'm a little late getting to this. I did have the day off today, which is fantastic. Like I said, played a bunch of games. A big thanks to some of my local friends, Ricky and Park, for inviting me out to some gaming events here in the area over the past weekend. It's just been fun to play a bunch of stuff. Got to play a couple games I haven't played before. Not necessarily a lot of new stuff, some older games that I think will be nice to chat about. Also, I did just get done pushing the upload button on the Joyride Turbo review. I had a lot of fun putting this together. I think you'll get to see that in this video. And this is the first review of 2025. Like I've said, I want to get some more stuff out here on the channel, and I've realized just how much I have in the pipeline. A good handful of Kickstarter games that I really need to get some content put together for. I've also got the Meadow adventure book review that I need to get put together. Tom said I can go ahead and start making some stuff for the Dice Tower channel. I've already started a script for that. Just lots coming down the pipeline. This week's going to be a crazy week for work. I'm going to be out of the house all week this week, which is going to kind of suck. But, so we'll see how next weekend goes. Anyways, lots to do. In fact, I think let's go ahead and pull this into frame because it's going to be a late night episode, folks. Let's go ahead and kick it off. Oh, you'll be able to tell how many edits I have to do by how quickly this glass goes down. Not a whole lot of new games in this week. This is Beach Day from Cake Pie Games. I'm not sure if it was actually the designer who reached out to me and asked if they could send me a copy of this to take a look at. I believe it is coming to Kickstarter. I have not gotten to open this up yet. Hoping to do it this week. I think we're going to head out to the Center of the Universe Brewing Company or something and open this up. Let's see. It says, in Beach Day, you will draft cards to create a beach decorated with shells, sandcastles, water, and more. You and the other players will take cards and place them as titles. Arrange your objects in optimal formations to score big. And it kind of shows a little bit of a pattern building idea on the backside. It looks cute. I will check it out here as soon as I possibly can. The next game, this is a little thing. Let's see. Oof. Yeah, it's just the lid. This thing is like 40 flippin' pounds. And let me move the box here because I know the echo gets pretty bad in these things. This is Iridia, The Paths We Dare Tread. This, and I wrote it here into my notes, this funded in August of 2021, and it was expected to deliver by December of 2022. Came in the past week. And this was so old that I really don't remember much about the Kickstarter. I remember that it is the same designer of the game of Xia, Legends of a Drift System, which I like, but it is a bear to teach that game. It has just a lot of different rules, a lot of unique rules for different spaces that you're moving your ships onto. There's a ton of dice chucking, a little too much for me, honestly, with just not enough mitigation, I think, to kind of keep it interesting. But I do like the systems of it. I do like building your ship and going all over the place. It is truly an open world game. And the other problem I kind of had with it was that, when you're trying to get certain locations to get missions done, I love the missions aspect of that game, but the locations aren't always there. This is, like I said, same designer. I know there's dice chucking in it. I don't really know anything else about it. I just don't remember what really the strengths of the campaign were. I do know it was a game that I was really hesitant on backing, and I think that when 2021, that was a long time. I was still a contractor back then, so I had a little extra income, and I think I just kind of thought, it'll be all right, and if I don't like it, I can sell it. I don't know, we'll see. But I have been seeing some really, really good feedback on this. People saying, the one quote that I read was, "This is what Gloomhaven should have been." Whether or not that's true, I don't know. That's just what I read. But people are saying that the game is just very, very approachable. It's very, very open, and it's a lot of fun to play. People are saying that they're just pounding out multiple sessions in a single playthrough because they're just having so much fun with it. We'll see if any of that holds up. I'll tell you this, the Quick Start rulebook was 16 pages. And I leafed through it. I didn't get a chance to really read anything on it. I don't know when I'm going to get to this. I'm not even going to try and promise any kind of review content of this because it's a big kind of a campaign. It's either a legacy or just a campaign game. I'm not sure. And I do know it's cooperative. I'm pretty sure it's cooperative. We've still got the Tidal Blades game to get through. We got so much other stuff to get played. Dwarf Romantic, etc. I just don't know when we're going to get to this. But I hope it holds up, and I am looking forward to trying it out. It's just going to be a while. Iridia. All right, that is it for new games. At least I think I did a quick run through the house. I was like, oh, this is new. This is new. Let's go film. So let's go ahead and get the question of the week. Apple juice, folks. Just apple juice. All right. Hey, last week I asked you, what do you think about scoring in games? And I talked this specifically about different types of games that have a score track, games that, you add up all the score at the end of the game. It's also come up games that have no score whatsoever. And I kind of asked you what was your favorite. Some folks kind of talked about scoring in general. Some folks went into more specifics. All of this was fun. Let's go ahead and kick it off with Jeff Foxwell, who pointed out that this is a tough question, adding that there are so many aspects to scoring to talk about, it could be an entire series. He agreed that there's nothing worse than being behind by a ton of points and knowing you're going to lose, but if the scoring is tight, a loss doesn't sting as bad and makes him feel like he could improve with more experience. And I'll mention here real quick that Jeff is a sort of a budding game designer. He's been working on a couple of games. I know there's a hidden movement game he's working on right now. We chatted about that, I think, in the previous episode. And yeah, I definitely, in fact, we were chatting about this with one of the game groups I was in this week, that it's those games where you just feel like you're playing absolutely terrible and everyone is just so far ahead of you. Those are the games I tend to get really frustrated in because I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. And it's just very... it's almost debilitating, right? It's very depressing because in those moments you just feel like, why am I not good at this? I mean, I don't expect to be winning, but why am I at least not in the running? Like, what am I just doing wrong here? So yeah, I definitely understand that. Ty McDonald said that he tends to prefer games where a leader is not clearly identified, citing Clank as a great example of a game where you're never quite sure who's winning until right up at the end. And we will see here that this is actually a pretty common theme throughout the rest of these comments. A lot of people tend to like these games that you kind of don't really know where things are laying until the very end of the game. And so I certainly agree with that myself. Janice, a first-time poster, said that Five Tribes is a game that she enjoys because she never knows how the final score is going to land, that it has a nice split of both public and private scoring information, and that the Artisan expansion adds even more hidden elements that can shift the scoring. That is a very fun game. I've played that a couple of times. I don't have a copy of it, but I've gotten to play it a couple of times. And I think you're right. It is those games that give you a little bit of public knowledge, but a little something on the secret that you're working on that kind of makes you go, well, hey, I think I'm beating you in that objective, but I don't know what you're working on that's face down. Who knows? This could still go in any direction. So I certainly agree with that one. And thanks for joining in here on the channel. Welcome. Bored Halfling said that he likes finding out the score at the end, that it challenges him to take more risks when he doesn't know if he's doing well enough. He said that the build up to that finale is more fun for him. And again, this ongoing topic now of, these games that you sort of don't really know how it's all going to land until the end of the game. So I certainly agree. Wonderflonium said he likes the scoring in The Great Zimbabwe, where players start with the same victory point goal, but throughout the game can gain asymmetrical abilities that increase the points they have to achieve. Now this sounds kind of interesting because it sounds to me like you really didn't talk about whether it's endgame scoring or whether it's, are you just trying to hit a particular goal? I didn't quite catch that. I did look this game up. I certainly heard of it, but I've never even seen it in the wild. And this sounds kind of neat. I will say that the images I saw of the game don't look the most exciting, but this scoring idea does sound pretty neat. I might have to try and check that out at something like The Retreat as a chance to get that played. So thanks for letting me know about that one. Teshra said that 9 of his 10 favorite games have no scoring because they are cooperative with simple win-loss conditions, adding that some have optional scoring to see how well you did against the game, but they usually skip that when playing. He also added that in competitive games, he too prefers the score being a mystery until the end, citing a variety of games in both categories. Yep, I know that you have mentioned a variety of cooperative games in several episodes, and I do agree that those make, I think, a lot of sense when it's just a matter of, do you win, do you lose? I will say that I think in some cases there's a difference in that sort of build up, that climax of the game, that if you just kind of, okay, well, I put this here and that wins. So I guess we just win. Sometimes that's not as interesting as saying, okay, well, let's add it up. All right, we've got 59 and he's got 55. Oh, man, we made it. I don't know. I've seen that kind of go both ways. And I've seen games where there is still that clear win, clear loss condition, and it still just feels so great to pull it off, regardless of, whether it's just a simple, okay, I trigger this action and we win the game. The Atlantis Rising is one of those games where you pretty much, okay, we take the action, we know we're going to succeed, but man, it just feels so good to put that last worker down and flip that tile over and we beat this system. So I do know what you mean there for sure. Tony Lawhorn said that he too loves games with endgame scoring where the final outcome is still undetermined, mentioning games like Brass, Federation, and Inferno, all of which have a ton of endgame scoring. Yeah, I remember the last time I played Brass, which might be the last time I played Brass. I was doing pretty well. I honestly, I knew I was not going to win that game, but I was doing pretty well in the score. And then, when we finished all the end game scoring, I was like, well, I really handily landed in last place, didn't I? Isn't that a bummer? I don't know. That game just doesn't click with me. But I certainly know what you mean there, having played that one. Jeremy Brooks said that Wondrous Creatures identified his sweet spot, that it has just enough in-game scoring to identify the player's spread, but has ample end-game scoring that can really swing things if you're paying attention to your opponents, adding, quote, put down your phone. That is a very, very true statement, and I agree with you. And in some of the games I'll chat about here that I played in the past weekend, there were definitely games where, man, they got a lot of points sitting there, but they don't know what I'm working on. And as long as I try to make sure that they're not doing too much, they're not getting away from me, I think I might still have this one in the bag. So I certainly can agree with that one. Penny said that she really had to think about this one, that she likes to have an idea of how she's doing during a game, but also likes being able to come out of nowhere and win with some in-game scoring, citing Ark Nova as a game where this can happen quite often. Yeah, I know what you mean there too. That is, that sort of path crossing aspect of that game where, okay, the first person to trigger the end game ends it, but you almost have to make sure that you have enough momentum that you cross significantly because players can have a lot that they're sitting on that then they can, okay, well, if I go ahead and trigger this and get this done, then I can cross even further and end up with that win. So, yeah, I know what you mean. It is kind of nice to say, all right, well, yeah, I mean, I'm only a few points behind, but, maybe you feel that need to drive even further. You need, okay, I mean, I'm doing okay here, but am I doing okay in my end game scoring? And so it is kind of interesting. Maybe it takes you away from the game, though, a little bit. That's maybe a thing to consider, but I can certainly see where you're coming from. As far as me, as I've already said here, I like those kinds of games, and I'm going to talk about a number of games coming up where there's no score track. I find the score tracks, a couple things. Yeah, they tend to be distracting. And they can be a little frustrating when you're seeing someone go, oh, I go up 15 points and you get 2. It's just not always a lot of fun. There's also that idea of, you can knock a scoreboard and all of a sudden you just have no idea where anyone was. That's a minor thing, but that can be a bit of an annoyance. It can happen sometimes. And so, yeah, I'm going to chat about some games coming up here in a moment where you just don't add up anything until the end of the game, and you're able to really sink yourself into what you're doing and just try to make sure that you're getting the points where they all matter and not really worry about it until the dust settles. And I feel like those are the games that I can have the most fun in. You might still have an idea if you're just not doing that well, but then maybe you add things up and go, well, hey, man, I tied for second, or I didn't make last, so it's not too bad. And those are the games that I tend to enjoy a good bit more. So with that in mind, let's get to some recently played games. Okay, I got to play a good couple of games in the past week. A few first here at home I will cover. The first was Hamlet by the Lake. This is actually the expansion to the game of Hamlet. My wife and I played this actually just after last week's Ratchet went out. And this is, as I've chatted about, a game where you're kind of building out this village. You're ultimately trying to build a church, and you are sort of doing this by moving these resources around using a production chain. And the rules are, I think they do a good job, but they're still a little tough to quite follow. And that is that various tiles in this board will generate resources. They will kind of push the resource to a neighboring tile via a road. And then you have to have donkeys on additional tiles to sort of push the resource to the next tile. And so if you have sort of a supply chain of donkeys, if you will, then you can move a resource all the way across the board, which you have to do because you never store, collect, or keep the resources, although actually there's an in this expansion, they changed that. You can have kind of your own personal storeroom that you can move things to. But otherwise, you have to consume resources right away. You have to kind of be able to move them from their supply all the way to wherever you're building, all in the same turn. And I like that system. I like the way that that works. Now, this is a game where you only know your score at the end of the game. And there's also sort of like these achievements that you can get while you're playing. If you're the first to build certain buildings, you will get benefits from that build. You kind of get like a milestone or a achievement that says, okay, when you make that resource from that building, you make a better version, which gives you more money and more points throughout the game. There are also end-game sort of triggers or milestones that, if you have sold so much to the market, if you have contributed the most to the church, if you have, the most donkeys or something like that, you'll get extra points at the end of the game. And so I was working on a couple things. There's also some end-game scoring that comes out on the tiles themselves. And I kind of thought I was doing okay. And then I kind of started paying attention to what my wife was doing. I put down my phone. And I was like, I think you're actually kicking the crap out of me. And she did. My wife clobbered me in this game. But I still had fun playing it. I will say that the lake expansion didn't really add as much as I was hoping. Whenever you enclose an area that basically shows your table underneath, if you've completely blocked it off so you can't build inside of it, you then fill it with lake tiles. They're little triangular pieces. And you fill that area with lake tiles. You put fish on the lake tiles. If there's enough lake tiles there, you can build a boat. You may get some points for the lake itself, yada, yada. And then you can go fishing. It adds an action on your turn where you can basically move a worker to a space and go fishing on all of the lake tiles that touch that tile that you're on. And you then draw these tiles, these fish tiles, from a bag. And there are common, uncommon, and rare fish. And so it's not really a push your luck because you know how many you're going to get to draw, and there's no drawing too many or drawing anything bad. But you may draw a bunch of commons. You may draw a bunch of rares, and then you can sell those fish. I think you can sell one per turn, maybe more, I don't remember. And the common ones will just give you some points. The uncommons and rares will kind of give you like a special ability that maybe you can use on just that turn. They'll maybe kind of trigger something that you can do, temporarily or briefly. And we just never really did it. It's another one of these expansions where it felt like it was a neat distraction from the game, but because the game is fairly fast-paced, it's fairly short, and there's a lot of stuff you're trying to do, you're like, well, I can go fish and maybe get $2, or maybe I can get this ability to trigger this thing, but I may not. I may get nothing, or I may just get something very basic. Again, just a couple of coins. And then I've kind of wasted a turn doing that. So, I don't know. It was neat. It looks pretty. I do like the idea of it. It just didn't really give you a reason to explore this particular expansion. There's no real draw to it. It's not a required system. There's nothing that you have to be able to do from this. It just kind of gives you another optional action. That's it. All right, up next. So, middle of the week, my wife had some plans with some friends. I was really glad she got out for a little bit. So my daughter and I played Flamecraft. Now, I've chatted about this a good bit, and I will say real quick, I only took one picture when I played this game. It's this one. And you're just going to have to be happy with that. I've talked about Flamecraft a good bit here on the channel. I really, really enjoy the game. Obviously, it's a completely gorgeous game. It also is definitely a family weight game, and it's a family weight game that kind of encourages friendliness and niceness. You get points when you give resources to other players. If you go to a spot where a player already is, you have to give them a resource. And so it kind of forces you to be a little kind in a way that most games don't normally do it. I joke that it's the opposite of a take that. It's kind of a give that game. But what I do like about it is that you do have to think on your feet. You can kind of say, okay, I'm going to do this on this turn, I'm going to do that on my next turn, I'm going to come over here and turn in these resources for to complete this order and enchant this card. But all of a sudden something else comes out, a new shop comes out, and you go, well, hang on, if I'm the first to get there, I can really take advantage of that benefit. So if no one else grabs it, I'm going to put a pause on my plans and go do that and get a bunch of coins that are worth points, or get a bunch of points, or do something else that's really going to set me up for something a little more interesting later on. And then I can get back to my plan. And I really like that about this game. Again, just a beautiful table presence. I beat my daughter by just a couple points. I was really proud of her. She did very well with this one. Flamecraft. Alrighty, so then I was invited over to a couple of friends' places over the weekend. We had, of course, a 3-day weekend here with Martin Luther King Day. And so first, I don't know if they'll see this, but a big shout out to my buddies Park and Ricky. Thanks for letting me be a part of the festivities this weekend. I got to Park's place on Saturday. I was on time. There were a couple other folks who were going to be there just a little later. And so we kind of looked around for something we could play quickly. Just a couple of players, 3 players. And I saw Fromage on the shelf. And I said, how about we do this one? Of course, I've chatted about this one as well, so I'm not going to go super deep into it. But what was interesting was that the two of them had played it a lot on Board Game Arena. Now, Park had played his physical copy. We played his copy. And but the other gentleman had only played it on Board Game Arena. And it kind of became this interesting topic of conversation in that this is one of those games that there's not a lot to manage. There really isn't. It's a very, very streamlined game. And it's a good, thinky game. This game is really, really good. But Board Game Arena still manages certain aspects of it for you. So, each round you kind of rotate this central board and you get your pieces back when they're facing your direction. Well, Board Game Arena just turns it for you and gives your pieces back and you're ready to go. So here you kind of, obviously with the physical copy, you have to be a little bit more attentive and go, okay, that guy's mine, I'll get this guy back, I get this guy back. And so it wasn't a problem whatsoever, but it was just kind of interesting sort of seeing that difference between knowing the physical version versus playing the online version, which kind of takes care of some of that for you. Anyways, this is another game where you have no idea what the score is until the end, and I was just kind of goofing off with it. I will say that we played with the a building variant. It comes with the game in that you get these tiles. Your player board has some built-in buildings on it, but you can also draft some additional buildings at the beginning of the game and use them to cover or replace the existing buildings that are on your game. You have to make that decision at the beginning of the game. You can't change your mind later on. And I had never gotten to play with these, and I really, really like them because there are a couple buildings I think on the player boards that just aren't that useful, at least to me, the way that I play. And so it was a really neat kind of puzzle, even at the beginning of the game, to go, wow, I really like this building, but I kind of want that one. Okay, well, I don't know what this, I'll overbuild that one. Now I got this other one. I also really want this one, but I kind of now like what I have here. Do I want to still get rid of one of these buildings? I ultimately did, and the building that I put out got me a bunch of endgame points, and I actually won this. I was kind of surprised because I was just kind of casually, but I really wasn't overthinking it. But a great game. Fromage by Ben Rossett. Up next, so this one I don't have. The next couple of games I didn't have. I finally got to play Flamme Rouge, and I did not make note of the designer here. It is Asger Harding, I believe, who designed the game of Heat. It's the same designer who originally designed Flamme Rouge. Heat was the sequel. And I've played Heat. Heat is okay. It was immensely popular when it first came out. I think bloated a good bit. But it's a decent game, kind of a hand management game. It's not a deck builder. I thought it was a deck builder. I wish it was a deck builder, but it wasn't. But Flamme Rouge is far more streamlined. So I'm not going to go real deep into the rules, but in Heat, you kind of have a hand of cards. You're playing which ones you can. If you have Heat in your deck, you're kind of stuck with it until you have a way to kind of parse it out or whatever. And you don't want too much Heat in your hand. If you draw a whole hand of just Heat, then you can't do anything. And the whole game is kind of managing these Heat cards, trying to keep some of them in in a ready deck that you can then draw and use for effect. But if you don't have any Heat to add to your deck, then you can't take advantage of those benefits. And if you end up with all the Heat in your deck, it can really clog you up and screw up your turns. In Flamme Rouge, you have 2 bikers. You only have 1 car in Heat. And you're just trying to get around this point-to-point track. It's not a circuit. You don't go laps. You just go from start to finish. And there are uphill spots and downhill spots and a couple other little things that we mess with, but not really too much. And one of your bikers is a sprinter. The other one's the ruler, I believe it's called. The sprinter is able to go some really, really fast distances for a short while, but the ruler has kind of a more tight spread of cars. So they can only go like, I don't know, 3 to 6, and the ruler can go 1 or 2 to 5, and then they have a couple of 9s that they can use. Anyways, you have a deck for each of these bikers. You pick up 4 cards of whoever's in the front of your 2 guys. You pick one of those 4 cards, put it face down, tuck the others underneath the deck, face up, then go to the next deck, do the same thing. Draw 4, keep 1 to play, put the other ones face up underneath your deck. That's it. That's your whole turn. You're just picking between 4 cards twice for your 2 riders. And then you just reveal, starting at the front of the pack, going to the back of the pack. What'd you play for this guy? What'd you play for that guy? And like I said, there's some specific rules on certain spots of the board. If you're going downhill, you can play a lower number and treat it like a higher number. If you're going uphill, you can only go a certain number of spaces. Even if you played a higher number, you just stop early and that's it. But it was so snappy and it was so thinky. And what was really interesting to me is that even in just picking between those 4 cards, even if you have like a 3, 4, 5, you still have plenty to think about whether you want the 3 or the 4 or the 5. Going the higher distance isn't always best. And the reason is that once you play that card, it is gone. So unlike Heat, where you can have the higher numbers and they sort of stay in your deck and they cycle through, hopefully you have them on the straightaways when you need them, you burn that 7 in Flamme Rouge, it's gone. You got 2 more, but that's all you get. And the idea is that as you're going, you're getting more and more tired. In fact, if you're at the front of the pack at the end of each round, you get an exhaustion card. I'm not sure if that's what it's called, but it's a 2 value. So it's the lowest distance you can go, and they clog up your deck, kind of like the Heat cards a little bit. And you may draw a hand and you just have a whole bunch of exhaustion cards because you've been working your ass off and you just don't have any more steam left in you. And that's really, really, really interesting. It was also very interesting because the way the drafting works is much more purposeful in Flamme Rouge than it felt in Heat. You're not ever using that drafting to pass like you can in Heat, but you can definitely sort of catch up if there's a single space gap between you and a biker in front of you at the end of the round, not just the end of your turn like in Heat. Everybody moves up to fill the gap in front of them, and you do that from the back forwards. And so we would have these turns where everyone was kind of spaced out, and then all of a sudden you go, everyone just collapses, and they're all back in this tight group together because they've drafted off of each other. And so again, a 3 was sometimes just as useful as a 5. Sometimes a 2 was better than a 5. And it was really, really interesting to me to sort of sit there and go, well, this could happen, or that can happen. Oh, I want to try and land on that space. Oh, but I might get drafted out of that space. Maybe I'm going to play one number short of that space and actually kind of hope that I get drafted in that space. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. It felt so clever, so snappy. We played this game at 6, and we had time to play it twice and still played another game after it, after we played Fromage, and all this was in like 4 hours. So it was really, really impressive. And I like this way better than I like Heat, which really, really surprised me. I'm not a bike rider. I didn't really care about the theme. But that game is really, really good, and I'm debating trying to get Flamme Rouge, maybe getting rid of my copy of Heat, although I know someone who has Flamme Rouge and all the expansions, so maybe I'll just go and play with him every once in a while. Anyways, that was Flamme Rouge. We played twice. I won the first game, which blew my mind, and then in the second race, I thought I just had miserable draw after miserable draw. I had not used any of my 9s for my sprinter, and I just kept a couple of turns, I just drew 2s, 3s, and 4s. Like, that was it. That was all I had. And so I felt like I just couldn't get anywhere. I was in the back of the pack, but I was close. But the girl who was in the back of the pack won, and I ended up coming in 2nd and 3rd place, which was kind of impressive as well. But I'm really glad she got the win because no one was betting on her. I was worried that I was going to just completely tank the second race and be like, oh, that was just beginner's luck, wasn't it? But at least coming in 2nd and 3rd kind of justified that. Maybe there's really something to this. I had a lot of fun with that one. The next game that we played, I didn't really quite enjoy that much. This was, and I got to wake up my computer here because it closed. This was Railways of the World, and I believe we played the Eastern American expansion. This one, so as soon as they said, well, let's play Railways of the World, and I was like, I don't really like train games. I'm like, well, this isn't really, your traditional train game. And I disagree, but that's okay. It was a massive board. And you're basically, to keep it kind of simple, on your turn you can do one of a couple different actions. You can build a train route to try and connect two different cities. You can try and sort of urbanize a city to pick its color. You can, if you already have a train route between two cities and maybe there's a cube on the one city that represents a type of resource, we have no idea what they are, but if there's a cube on a city that another city is the color of, that means they want that cube. And if you have a route that connects them, you can move that cube to the target city and gain a point. And as you gain points, that increases your income from round to round. You take 3 turns in each round. You start with absolutely no money, and you have to bid on turn order at the very beginning of the game, and you have to take actions at the very beginning of the game, which means you immediately have to start taking loans. You cannot really play the game without taking any kind of loan. And right away, I don't like that kind of system. I have enough debt as it is. I don't need to play a simulation where I acquire more. So I right away was just like, I'm not feeling this. But then there's one other aspect of it that bothered me, and that was that these cards come out at the beginning of the game, and there's a couple different types of cards. There's a whole bunch to start off with. Obviously, as you're taking them, that number dwindles, and only a few more come back out throughout the game. And some of the cards will say, okay, the first player to do this thing will get this card, and it gives them a bunch of points. And some of them say, okay, here's a permanent effect that its owner gets. Here's a couple cards that said, just do this one-time thing. And there may have been one other type that I'm forgetting. But Park, to his credit, did a wonderful job at telling us what all these cards meant and even kind of helping us to understand some of the synergy between them. So as he's looking through me, he goes, well, hey, here's this one that basically says the first person to deliver to Louisville is going to get a certain number of points. And there was a city right next to Louisville that had the cube that Louisville would want. And so he basically explained that, well, the first person who builds at Louisville to that city, collects that card, is going to get this many points. Then they're going to be on their way to collecting this other card, which is worth more points, and that's going to trigger this card, which is even worth more points. And basically, the player who goes first is going to be able to pick up 12 points right off the get-go, right from the beginning of the game. They're going to have this tremendous advantage. So, since you're bidding on turn order, y'all better bid high. Well, a lot of us hadn't played this before. Not a lot of us, but a number of us hadn't played it before, myself included. So I had no idea what was a high value. And I didn't really want any part of it. I was like, look, this is just not, I don't do bidding. I don't do, negotiations. I have no idea what anything's worth. I've never played this before. I'm just going to pass. Well, the bidding only went to like $3,000. So the guy who won only had to get a couple of debt tokens, which gives you negative score at the end of the game. And he put this engine into place exactly as predicted. And guess what? He won the game. He clobbered the crap out of everybody because he had such an initial advantage. I felt that this game had a tremendous runaway leader problem, and it certainly doesn't help when that initial leader starts off with such a tremendous advantage because it's literally laid out in front of him. And I kind of think that had I been in that scenario and I had seen that later, I'd say, hey, well, let's discard these cards. Let's put out some different cards that maybe aren't quite so powerful off the get-go. And maybe let's not just pave the way for somebody. Let's kind of let everyone have an equal chance getting this going. So anyways, I came in dead last in this game. I did not expect to come in any better than dead last in this game. I got to play it. Glad I got to check out something new, but definitely not something I have any interest in playing. Again, that was Railways of the World. And that was Saturday. Sunday, I met up with some other buddies, my friend Ricky and my friend Chris Mutton, who I've mentioned before. And the first game that I joined in was Rebirth by Rainer Knizia. I believe this is a relatively brand new game. It might be a remake. I'm not entirely sure. But when I first saw this on the table, I thought, well, it looks nice. It was a very colorful board. Apparently, you're trying to rebuild Scotland or something like that. It's Rainer Knizia, so it's fairly abstract. Even when there's a map and a board and sort of an idea, it's still going to be abstract. And there's it's a hex-based board. There's a bunch of icons all over this board. There are sort of tile spaces, hex spaces that you want to try and build these energy farms on. Supposedly they're energy farms or wind farms. It's just a tile with an electrical bolt on it. That's all it is. You're also trying to build fields. At least they're supposed to be fields. Again, it's just a tile with some plants on it. That's it. And you're trying to rebuild the cities. And again, you just have tiles with little houses on them. That's it. And so on your turn, you're going to place a tile on the board. And that tile is dictated by whatever tile you draw from your bag. You have just enough tiles in your bag so that when everyone has had their equal number of turns, pretty much the whole board is covered. And that's it. The game is over. But what it kind of means is that you don't necessarily have the agency that you'd like to have for such a simplistic game. As you're putting these tiles out, you're getting points. As you're rebuilding these cities, you can get some points. There are these monasteries or chapels, whatever they were, that as you're building next to them, they can give you an endgame scoring card, which was really nice. I was going for those because I actually had an endgame scoring card that said, basically, get all of these monasteries built, or have a tile next to each one of them, whatever it was. But I was drawing some endgame cards that as soon as I drew it, I'd look at the board, nope, I already cannot get this. It's already impossible. I can throw this card away, which is a bummer because I just wasted that turn to get this thing that I can't use. And also, you could look at the board and go, oh man, if I can get that house, if I can put a 2 house token right there, I can close up that city and I can gain a bunch of points, and it's next to this, I can get that put out. This would be fantastic. And then you go 4 turns before you ever draw that tile, and by then someone else has filled it. And so, you're supposed to be rebuilding the city, but you don't really have any control except for the actual turn that you're on. I also didn't really care for the fact that you have to keep your tile face up so everyone can kind of see what you have. And so, because they had literally just played this game before I got there, they already had a good understanding of it, and they can kind of look at my tile and go, oh, well, it's going to help him to go there, so I'm going to go there instead. And I was like, well, can I kind of, look, I only get one action. I don't get to choose that action. Can I at least be secretive about that action? Nope, you got to make sure everyone can see it. So I'm glad I got to play this. Like I said, it was a very pretty game, very, very nice components. Not anything I need to get super anxious about playing again, but that was Rebirth by Reiner Knizia. Okay, the second to last game that I played there was the one I had been quite excited to play at 4. This was Ascending Empires. That's right, I just did a unboxing video about this last week here on the channel. And I was actually glad to see that Ian Cooper, the designer, came back with some feedback, some response to my video. He actually clarified a couple rules that I had wrong. One of them I was able to find in the rule book, but it was not where the actions are. It was actually in sort of like almost like the preamble of the rule book when it's showing what all the components are. And it's like, well, here are the planet discs, and by the way, you can only put 3 things on a planet disc. It didn't cover that, at least that I saw, in the deployment actions and the build actions to go, oh, by the way, remember, only 3 pieces of plastic on a planet. But that's fine. The other thing was in the way that you grow the technology, and even I could see it going both ways in that rule book. So I'm glad he clarified, because I would not have figured that out on my own. Anyways, got to play this at 4. I'm not going to go super deep into this because, A, it revealed more complexity to me than I had sort of seen on my own the first time I played it, when I just played it with my wife and I. One particular player grasped it and obliterated us in the score. And it was nice, though, because he did it without a lot of combat. My other friend used a lot of combat, and he had amassed a bunch of points in the game, as had the other player. My friend Chris and I had almost no score going into the end game. You start off with 42 tokens in a 4-player game, 42 points. And as you're playing the game, as you're researching technology for the first time, and as you're engaging in combat, you collect points. I had 5 points at the end of the game. My buddy Chris had 2, and so the other 35 were distributed between the other 2 players. However, in the end game, because I had expanded my influence, I had a bunch of planets under my control, and I had a bunch of cities out which are worth points, I picked up 25-something points in the end game, and I was pretty happy with that. It made me realize that you can still be successful at the game, even if you're not doing a whole lot of combat. However, you do have to do technology, and I did not do that very well. The first time I played it, we felt that the technologies really just weren't very useful. And at the lower levels, they're just not. However, this is the first time I got to see any of the higher levels of those techs into play. And holy crap, are they kind of overpowered. In particular, there's an action, and it's very clearly laid out in this game, that you can only build a building once on your turn. You cannot boost it. You can't cheat it. There's even a discovery token that lets you build, and it clearly tells you that has to be the last thing you do in that turn, so you cannot build anything else. And yet the level 4 green technology says after you do a build, go build something else on another planet. And the player used that to tremendous effect. And like I said, just clobbered us in the end game. The other thing that I thought was that really kind of started to show itself was that, in a lot of these 4X games, it is combat that is usually the random element. Maybe you're drawing some cards, maybe there's events, maybe there's something else that can kind of happen. There's none of that really in this game. But combat is actually completely deterministic. There's no card play, no dice rolling. Once your force is stronger than the opponent's force, you just flat out win. And if you kind of put yourself into a fight and you have the majority, you win. The fight's immediately over. It triggers automatically. You have almost no control over it. The thing that you don't have any control over is your movement. And this whole idea of, okay, flicking your discs and trying to get to where you're going, if you fall short or you ricochet off the wrong way. I mean, there was a time that I really wanted to try and reclaim control of a planet someone had just taken from me. I was kind of building a series of turns off of it. I needed to reclaim control of that planet. I flicked and I came up short. I used the second action to flick again. It ricocheted off the disc, falling just outside the orbit, and I couldn't get back into the orbit, and there went my action. And it was so frustrating because that's not usually something in these 4X games that is random. That's usually the one thing you can plan out well in advance. Okay, I need to get this fleet over here. I'm going to need this much movement. Here's far I can move. Here's the spaces I can move through. This is what's blocked. This is what, this isn't blocked, whatever. Bam, here I go. And in this game, it is just, hopefully you can make it. And so that really just felt strange as a random element that is not normally random in this genre of games. So I'm still just not really sure where I stand on this. The components are really nice. Everything looks really cool. I love the matte and the vibrant colors. But man, I'm just not really sure that the strategy is really there. I'm not really sure that the depth of the gameplay is really there. In fact, pretty much everyone else at the table did not really care for it, which did kind of surprise me a good bit. Anyways, this was Ascending Empires. Okay, last game that I played there was Tower Up. And my buddy Chris even kind of told me, he goes, oh man, I'm looking forward to seeing this on the Ratchet. The problem was with this, and Chris knows this, was that we sat down to play. He brought the game. He goes, okay, I'll teach you the actions. Okay, we're trying to build a city, and the buildings in this city are made of 4 different colors of little plastic pieces: black, gray, white, and brown. Okay, so you have these cards that come out, and you can draw a card, and then it just tells you what pieces of plastic that you get. And that's your one action. You can just draw a card. The other action you can take is you can build out in the city. You place tiles out, and you place city. Okay, ready, let's go. So we're like, okay, well, hey, we need tiles, so we're just going to start drafting cards. We went on the table like twice, just picking up cards and getting a bunch of tiles. And finally, someone goes, well, how do we build? Like, I don't understand. There's nothing out here. What do we do? And Chris goes, well, you can't have buildings of the same color next to each other. We're like, well, okay, so we just put a tile out? Like, again, like, what do we do? And he goes, well, okay, let me check the rule book. Flips through the book. Oh, hang on, I'm supposed to have tiles out here already. I'm supposed to have pieces out. Oh, okay, all right, cool. So now what? Well, okay, so now you got to build next to an existing building. You have to put one of these colored pieces on the board next to an existing building. It has to be a different color, and then you have to add a piece of the building that's there, and then you can choose to put one of your player color kind of caps on top, and you'll score points based on how many tiles are underneath it. You can move a track, yada, yada. Oh, okay, got it. Sounds good. So now we're drafting cards. Now we're placing out pieces. Okay, we're putting caps on. There's a couple of goals. We understood how those work. Okay, we're good. We got like another 20-something minutes in the game. Chris goes, oh, I forgot this really, really important rule that you're supposed to put tiles on every building next to the one that you put out, not just one that you want to. You have to build on everything. And we're like, holy crap, that would have changed everything. Our scores would be different. Everything would be totally different. He was like, yep, kind of. and I'll say this to my buddy Chris. Maybe he's watching this. Like, I'm sorry we all kind of jumped on you on that one. We were kind of like laughing about it, but we were also kind of all annoyed by it. But I also remember a thing that you said to me a long, long time ago about how, we had this feud over rules and games. And it was never a feud. And I didn't really address it then because I didn't have a proper response ready for it. But wanting to play a game correctly was nothing that we would feud over. Whether Hidden Leaders is a good game or not, and it's not, that's something that we can feud over. I'm totally fine with that. But I just want to play the game correctly. And we all wanted to play the game correctly. And so, we were kind of all flustered that here we were 20-something minutes into a game, still learning how to play it. So I just want to say this, and this is a PSA for everyone. I've got 400-something games on these shelves around this room. I can't remember all the rules. There's no way. So if you're taking a game to a game group or a game day or a game, whatever, 2 options. Either try to read the rules ahead of time, or don't bring the game. Or at least, and I said 2 options, here's a third, break the game out and say, hey guys, listen, this game's fairly quick, it's kind of neat, you're building these buildings, I'm a little shaky on the rules, can you give me like 5 minutes, and I'll just brush through the rules real quick. Maybe you guys can like set up. And I've been like the Dice Tower Retreat, we do this all the time. Someone will pull up the rule book on their phone and set the game up, which in Tower Up would be really, really quick, admittedly. While the other person's sitting there and, checking the rules or learning the rules or whatever. Because at the Dice Tower Retreat, sometimes we're learning a game for the first time. At least in this case, you're just refreshing. And I will tell you, I will absolutely 100% back you up. I will make sure that everyone leaves you alone. I will make sure that you have the time that you need to refresh yourself, because it's a benefit to all of us, right? And my buddy Chris is the kind of guy, like, he loves introducing new people to the hobby, and I think that's really, really commendable. But even I've been at some of those tables where I'm like, that's not the rules for this. You're teaching this game wrong. And it's kind of like you're not really doing people a favor, especially when we're already into the game. You go, okay, I'll look it up now. No, you should have kind of already looked it up. So anyways, Tower Up, once we kind of got the hang of it, and I don't know what else we may have gotten wrong. It was a light game. I'd call this kind of a palate cleanser game. If I got out of something really, really heavy, I would say, oh, hey, someone's got Tower Up. Let's play that for like 30 minutes, and that'll kind of get me ready for the next heavy game. It was cute. It was fine. It kind of reminded me of... what the heck, Expand City, and then you're putting out these colorful buildings, and I imagine by the time you're done, you've got all these skyscrapers and such, although we didn't play that right, so we didn't really get to see it. But anyways, that was Tower Up, and I don't know who the designer or publisher was on that game. I do believe it was a Kickstarter. But anyways, got to play that. The last game, I got home that night earlier than I thought I would, and I turned to my wife and I said, hey, why don't we play one more game? And I broke out Ostia. And I wasn't even really sure that they were going to go for this, but I wanted my daughter to check this game out as well. It kind of uses a Mancala system to take your actions, and she loves Mancala, and I thought that maybe if she got to see that into another game, maybe she'd be excited. Now, she didn't really care about the Mancala system, but she did eventually quite enjoy teaming up with her mom to try and beat me. They didn't make it, but they tried, and they did very, very well. I'll explain that more here in a moment. There's a lot to this, and I really don't want to get too far into it, but one of the main scoring principles is that you've got this track on the side of the board. It's called the reward track, and there are points that you can get for every building that you've built, every ship that you've built, and every jug of wine that you've collected. Sure, why not? And all those things are worth more points the higher you get up this reward track by collecting rewards throughout the game. You can also do a set collection scoring. There are these 4 symbols you can click that you can collect: a nobleman, a noblewoman, a wild animal, and exotic animals, whatever. And if you get a set of all 4, those are worth 12 points. And there's also these honor cards that you can buy throughout the game. Once you've met the requirements to be able to buy the card, you pay 4 gold and you get the card. There are 5 resources in the game. There is permits, which you use to move ships, wood that you use to build ships, grain that you use to fulfill orders, which is what gives you some of those card symbols and set collection symbols and the jugs of wine. There is stone that lets you build the buildings, which can be used to upgrade your player board to actually help you do all this even better. And then lastly, there is gold, and gold can be converted 3-to-1 into any resource or upgraded for a 2-to-1 conversion ratio. The way that you take your actions on your turn is that you have a port board in front of you with 6 wedges on it. There's a couple little boats on each of these slices, and you choose a slice of that pie, or that port pie, whatever, and you'll get the resources of that wedge depending on how many boats are there. So if you're picking up in the shipbuilding area, you're going to get wood. And there are small boats and large boats, which you can unlock later on. The large boats are worth 2 of that resource at that particular moment in the turn. So again, I pick that wedge, I get wood, depending on how many boats are there and their size. And then I pick up all those boats. Let's say I have 3. I'm going to drop 1 in each of the wedges going clockwise around that wheel until I place the last boat. And in that wedge is the action that you take. So if I just happen to pick up 6 wedges or 6 boats out of a wedge, then I will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, triggering that same wedge that I just picked up those boats from to get myself the resources. And that's kind of the optimal number you want to try and aim for, because you can pick up a bunch of boats, get a bunch of resources, go right around and trigger that action again using those brand new acquired resources. And that's really kind of the gist of it. I mean, there's these pathways that you're taking from the port of Austria. You're trying to reach all these distant, other ports or other cities, and there's certain things you can do along the way. You can get to other ports where you are able to build buildings. That's actually where you claim the buildings and you put them on your player board. And again, those will increase the resources that you get out of a certain wedge. They may cheapen the cost of future actions. They change the conversion rate of the gold. And you can even use one of them to just give you one spot up on that reward track. And there's a couple expansions for it. And I mentioned when I got this, I got the Pirates expansion. We did not break that out. I didn't want to hit my wife and daughter with too much, and I needed to remember how to play it myself. And this is another one of those games you really have no idea what the score is until the end, although obviously you do have that reward track as kind of an indicator as to, how you might do with endgame scoring, but you can be really high at the reward track and not have a lot of those resources. I did not actually have as much wine at the end of the game as my wife did. We had the same number of boats. I think I had one extra building, but then some of the port tiles that you can build on may also give you extra symbols of that type if you have built on it. So the endgame scoring can still be a little unpredictable. You can have a little bit of an idea, but you're not quite sure. Now, the funny bit of it was, when I played this at the Dice Tower Retreat in 2023, I scored something like 260 points compared to, I think it was 150 and 180 out of my two fellow gamers. When we played this the other day, I picked up 360 points, and my wife and daughter collectively scored 295, which was still better than I had a couple of years ago. So I was really impressed with how they did, with the fact that they had never seen it before. It's also not the most attractive looking game. It's not an ugly game by any means, but it's definitely got that sort of a Euro color palette. Just your lighter shades and these almost kind of pastel colors. The board that you have in front of you is really, really nice looking with all the boats on it. It gets very busy and very interesting, but the main board itself it's fine. And of course also, shipping from the Port of Ostia is not something that I ever expected my wife and daughter to have any interest in, but they actually both really enjoyed the game. They really liked working together. I don't know how soon they might tackle this. At least my daughter might tackle it on her own, but my wife has already expressed interest in playing this again. And I really do enjoy this game. The puzzle is very, very interesting. It is something that you can really immerse yourself into, trying to find the right combos. There were plenty of times I got myself stuck where no matter what I did, no matter which boats I picked up, there were only two actions I could trigger, and neither of them I had enough resources to even use. And so a couple times I had to I'm going to pick up to get 4 stone and go 3 spaces and then do absolutely nothing because I don't have any of that resource. And to do that and still come out with that kind of a score, I thought was, pretty decent. Anyways, just a fantastic game. And Uka Bukoya, the designer of Ostia, is no slouch when it comes to components or just general game quality. Okay, that is it for recently played games. Let me real quick mention question for next week. Now, we've talked about scoring, and we've talked about, how we sort of react to scoring, what kind of scoring that we like. I want to actually chat now about winning games. And I want to kind of approach this from 2 tiers. And we actually had this conversation a little bit on Sunday. First of all, how important to you is winning? And I, we all kind of say, oh, I never go to win. I never really care if I win. And I don't think that's always true. I always love listening to the cooking competitions on the Food Network. Yes, I watch a lot of Food Network. And you always interview the chef at some point, and the guy's, well, I came here to win. I came here to take it all. No one ever goes in there and says, nah, I came here to pretty much screw off and do nothing. I was going to throw some eggs across the room until they asked me to leave. Like, that never happens, right? They're all there. You're in a game. You're competing. Yeah, you kind of hope that you're going to win. You're not going to throw eggs if you don't, hopefully, but how much do you push for it? How much do you find that sort of desire to try and win? Do you just kind of go there and see what happens and let yourself be pleasantly surprised if you come out on top? Is it something you try a little harder for, etc.? And the other kind of question is how do you feel when those games end? How do you feel when you lose or you win, or maybe you've lost for the 10th time in a row, or maybe you haven't won anything all weekend, maybe you haven't won anything yet all year, We were chatting a little bit about this on Sunday, about being like sore winners or sore losers. The kind of person who wins the game is like, man, I took you out and I kicked your butt there. Like, obviously no one really likes those kind of people. And people also don't like the kind of gamer who's like, man, I never win this game, and you guys are all picking on me, and this is no fun. Or they do that passive aggressive, like, well, I didn't really care. I knew I was going to win. It's fine. I swear I'm not impersonating anybody I know, but I'm kind of curious about that too, because I know that sometimes I have gotten grumpy when I lose a game, and it's usually when I am like 100 points behind everybody else. And I was chatting with my buddy Chris. We played Boone Lake years ago, because I will never play that game again. And I was so far behind Chris and our other friend that I was just like, guys, I hate this. Like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know how the heck you guys are about to lap me on the scoreboard. I just don't get it, and I'm not having any fun. I'm just sitting here just moving around this board, because at this point it's not even worth sitting here anymore. I'm just wasting my time, and it just got very frustrating. And usually, that's why I like those games that all score at the end, because I had no idea. I had no idea I was going to win. I had no idea it was fourth place. Bummer. But I'm already looking forward to the next game, whatever it may be. So I'm kind of curious. Again, how do you approach winning? But then what do you think is sort of that right balance of, hey, I'm glad I won, but I don't want to be too glad that I won. I won fromage, and I was like, oh, well, didn't expect that. Okay, what are we playing next? Just kind of moved on. So I kind of want to get into that conversation and see what people think. That is it for episode number 45. Thanks for watching. As always, I appreciate your comments. Again, as always, love chatting with folks here on the channel, and loving to see more people subscribing and getting involved in the comment section. So that's it for me this week, folks. I'll see you next week for 46. Cheers.